week, new figures from 45 police forces around the United Kingdom revealed that the number of reported homophobic hate crime cases has trebled from 2014, 2015 up to this year. Let me give you the stat. 6,655 cases in 2014-15. 18,465 cases in 2019-20. Get a load of that. What is that? What is happening? There's a 20% rise in reports to police of homophobic hate crime, according to data which was obtained through the Freedom of Information requests to these police forces. The police are saying that the police forces are saying that this increase could reflect a greater confidence that people have in reporting such hate crimes. That always feels like a bit of a cop-out, doesn't it? But we're going to try and see whether or not there is any truth in that this morning, and speak to two people who know this well. Leni Morris is the CEO of an LGBT anti-violence and policing group. And Luke Fincham has been the victim of a homophobic attack themselves. Let's speak to them both this morning. Luke, Leni, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for being with us. Luke, let's start with you. Thank you very much for taking some time out to talk about something that must be really difficult for you to relive, I've no doubt. Could you take us back, Luke, to that moment that you were attacked and talk us through what happened?
So I'm a singer, drag artist, and I was on the way back from a shoot. I had a full face of makeup, but I was out of costume. I was in like trackies and t-shirt and a hat. And I got on a bus quite late, I would say maybe just before midnight. And the bus was very packed. And this very drunk guy came and sat quite close to me, but not directly next to me. And for about 10 minutes, he was muttering a load of racial, homophobic, transphobic slurs, which most people on the bus, if not all of them, could hear and see. And about 10 minutes into the journey, he punched me in the face and just tried to attack me. I was able to stop him from doing more than just the punch. But what really caught me about the situation was that during the muttering, during the when he started to get a bit louder, he started to swear more. No one really did anything. Everyone just kind of sat there and watched it happen. He then, he had knocked off my hat, my glasses, so it was quite, and I had like nails on and everything. It was a bit disorientating, but I was kind of wrestling whether to get off the bus or to just go to the top deck, and it was quite late, and I just decided that I would just go to the top deck. But I did have this moment of looking around at everyone on the bus and like, is no one gonna do nothing? Like, I can't see, my hat's on the floor, like I'm in drag, like, you know. But yeah, no one really did anything until when I got up, the guy tried to get out of his seat and go after me, but he was so drunk he couldn't get out of his seat. And this white woman opposite me screamed as he got up. And that was the only point where everyone on the bus started to congregate together and be like, tell the driver that, oh, there's this man on the bus and he's, you know, attacking people. And it was like, he didn't attack people. He clearly had a problem with me. So yeah, that was kind of the gist of what happened. But I guess for me, it was more the fact that no one really did anything, like, and no one even asked if I was okay, which I was, like, you know, I've been hit before, but it wasn't a great moment for me. It took me a little while to kind of get my head around it and be comfortable going in public again.
No, I can completely imagine, and I don't suppose the people on the bus could have been in any doubt as to what his intention was, and as to why he was attacking you. So you said that afterwards it knocked your confidence.
Yeah, like I mean, I live down in Brighton, and I've lived in a lot of places, and as a queer person, I have, in this country at least, I've felt the most safe in Brighton. And it kind of knocked not my faith in Brighton, but just, you know, I'm so used to walking around in drag and going to performances in heels and wigs, like, and feeling relatively comfortable, as much as you can, walking around in heels in broad daylight.
Yeah, but actually, you're right to say that, Luke, because a climate has been created over the last couple of years where that expression of who you are is fine, it's acceptable. Not only is it acceptable, it's celebrated, particularly in a place like Brighton. And so when something like that happens, that must feel like an invasion, I guess.
Yeah, because and it's not the first incident I've had in Brighton, but any other violent incident I've had in my past has been in other places, has been in school. So yeah, it definitely screwed me up for a little bit, and I had to take the time to use public transport again, and especially that late.
I can imagine. And Luke, you talk about this event not as an isolated case, but as something that is just sort of par for the course. And so we're talking about these figures this morning. We're talking about this increase, Luke, in the number of homophobic attacks. And I guess that this comes as no surprise to you.
No, not at all. As I said, like I got stuff when I was younger, but there was this kind of period, I would say, after kind of during and after college where I started to see less of it. But yeah, it seems once I kind of hit my 20s in recent years, it seemed to get a bit more intense, and people were a bit more vocal, to the point where whenever I, not doing much nowadays, but whenever I've gone out, I'm kind of expecting it, and not necessarily to get violent every time, but I'm always expecting a comment or a joke or something, and I hate to say it, but most times when I'm expecting it, it usually happens. And not just to me, like, loads of people I know, loads of people I've seen in the street.
No,
it doesn't surprise me.
That makes sense, and it's hard to hear, but it's important to hear, I think. Let's bring in Leni Morris, CEO of Galop, an LGBT anti-violence charity. Leni, Luke talks there about leaving the house expecting to be on the receiving end of a homophobic attack, expecting it. And I guess that is an experience that, Leni, you and the people that you work with will know very well.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, Luke's story is not an unusual one, and thank you for sharing that with us this morning, Luke. We know that last year alone, according to the Home Office figures, reported incidents of homophobic hate crime rose 25%, and transphobic hate crime rose 37%, and that's just in a single year. And we know from our own work, from the work we do directly with victims and survivors of hate crime, and also from our research and our contact with police, that over the last 6 months, exacerbated by the pandemic, that the figures are only rising still. And I would want to note that one of the things that we know from research and also from figures from the Home Office is that the seriousness of injury suffered in LGBT plus hate crime attacks is really serious, and is more serious than other forms of hate crime quite often, but tends to lead to lower rates of charges for perpetrators. So I think that gives you sort of a big picture of what's going on in anti-LGBT hate crime in the UK at the moment.
And so one of the things that we've been referencing this morning, Leni, is that point from police forces who are saying that there is an increasing confidence when it comes to reporting these kind of crimes, and that's contributing to the increase in the numbers. Is that your view?
Well, the increase in reporting itself may be an increase in reporting, if that makes sense. But what we do know very clearly is that the majority of homophobic, biphobic and transphobic hate crimes are not reported. We know from government surveys that 91% of LGBT plus people don't report what's happened to them, even the most major incidents that have happened to them. And yet 40% of LGBT plus people are experiencing a hate crime every year. So it's very, very clear, and we can see from the volumes of cases that we work with that the majority aren't being reported. So these figures really are just the tip of the iceberg.
Clearly. Okay, so we're, if it's not necessarily just reporting, why are these crimes getting worse? Why are they continuing to happen? Why have we? I mean, Luke's own experience there, actually, that he's brought to the table, Leni. Excuse me, Luke, that they have brought to the table. that's a clear demonstration, isn't it, that people are leaving the house and expecting it, perhaps more so than they were several years ago. Why? Why is this happening? Why is it getting worse, Leni?
It's a really, really great question, and I wish I had a simple answer for you. It's really hard to comment sort of on a broad this is why this is happening. All we can see really clearly is that it definitely is. We know from our pre-pandemic polling that about 1 in 10 people in the UK still see LGBT plus people as dangerous to others. So we know that there is sort of an undercurrent, even though it is a minority in the UK, of people who see LGBT plus people as a threat. And we know that during the pandemic, if we look back at the rise over the last 6 months, I know these figures don't cover that, but we've seen, LGBT plus people blamed for the COVID-19 pandemic, whether that's because LGBT plus people are often seen as carrying disease by a small proportion of people, or related back to the AIDS pandemic, or whether that is because the COVID-19 pandemic has been seen by some people as a punishment from God for LGBT plus permissiveness, if you like. So it's a really wide range of reasons that these attacks happen. But I wouldn't say that it's easy to pin down a single reason for a rise.
Wow, blimey, that is absolutely astonishing, isn't it? Astonishing. I mean, just the facts that that sort of headline point of people still feeling like LGBT people are a danger to them, but also the increase during the pandemic due to people believing that LGBT people are to blame for the pandemic, albeit perhaps a small proportion of people, but it's astonishing all the same. Luke, your experience during the pandemic, has it reflected that? Have things been better or worse for you since the start of the year?
I don't know about better or worse, just consistent, I guess. With social distancing and masks and me going on public transport less, there hasn't been another violent incident since that one that I talked about at the beginning of the year. But yeah, I still get comments, laughed at, whenever I go out, pretty much, as I said, not to sound macabre, but I just kind of expect it, and I'm usually correct. And with my other queer friends as well, I see it with them.
Sure. And Luke, Leni's outlined there some of the reasons that they believe that this is getting worse. As somebody on the front line of this, if you will, and somebody who's had a lived experience of this over the last 5 years, as those numbers have increased, in your mind, what's the cause?
I mean, apart from the obvious, just political discourse that's kind of unraveled itself over the last few years since 2016 or even before then. But honestly, I'm not too sure, because I get surprised. I get surprised every time something happens, especially with everything with BLM that happened this year. I get surprised with the people even I have in my life who have some of these views. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know why it has increased, or what has made it become more frequent. I'm sorry. I'm not really sure.
No, you're right. I think it's one of those things that has left a lot of people scratching their head, Luke, and it is incredibly hard to fathom for the vast majority of people, I would hope. Leni, I wonder if this factors into your thinking, because there's a very interesting a period of history that we're living through right now with our reliance on social media, and this is something that I've been talking about quite a bit lately. I'm working on a project at the moment that I'm doing a lot of research into the way that we are splintering off into our own niches, if you will. Our lives are being reflected back at us, not just through what we see on our Facebook feed, but what we listen to on Spotify, what we watch on Netflix. We are sort of splintering off into niches of one, effectively, and perhaps not experiencing life from the viewpoint of the other. In the work that you do, Leni, are you seeing that sort of increased reliance on things like social media as being a contributing factor to people's lack of empathy, perhaps?
Oh, that's a great question, Darryl. I don't know if I'd be able to directly comment on that. I mean, what we know from our pre-pandemic polling is that there is a rise in young people's anti-LGBT plus attitudes. It's a small proportion, but we are seeing an increase in that. But I don't know if I would relate that directly to social media. I think that there's also a really unfortunate narrative that goes about that is a suggestion that hate crime against LGBT plus people is specifically something that happens online, and that these rises may in some way just be, you know, people being mean on Twitter and people getting upset about it. But actually what we see reported is, you know, 75 to 80% of those things happen in real life, are abuse and violence experienced by people face to face with their perpetrators. So I think that whilst I couldn't comment directly on the ways in which our use of the internet is affecting this, I think it's really important that we recognise the real life consequences of people's attitudes.
A question from Graham, actually. He says, in the interest of the stats, what does homophobic crime mean? Is that an actual attack or verbal? How do you categorise that, a homophobic attack?
That's a really great question. So it can be quite a wide range of things that we're talking about. So we see people who experience extraordinarily vicious physical attacks by individuals or by groups of people that can lead to life-changing injuries. We also see, you know, people breaking into other people's houses. We see blackmail. We see people having people going directly after them online and publishing really personal information about them online and doing all kinds of really destructive things to people. But it's a very, very wide range of things that can classify as a hate crime.
Sure. I'm not sure if we answered the question this morning. I'm not sure if that question of why have we seen a threefold increase in the number of attacks is even really answerable. Leni, do you think? I mean, I'm trying. Sort of my job, I guess, this morning is to try to get to the nub of it and to try and figure out why it's happening. But is it even possible?
I don't think it is at this point, you know, Darryl. I think the important thing is that we're talking about it. And I think the more that we have the conversation, people understand what the situation is like for the LGBT plus community right now, the more we can work towards changing it together.
Yeah, quite right. And I suppose if we can't answer that question, then the very least that we can do is reflect the issue and try to do our bit to contribute to the change. Leni, thank you so much for your time this morning. Really, really nice to talk to you. Luke, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the radio so early in the morning and telling what must be a very difficult story to tell, but it will have a huge impact, I'm sure. Thank you so much, Luke.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you both. Leni